Hey guys, Dave with First Place Auto Parts. You know, if you horse around with classic American muscle cars long enough, or you like vintage motorcycles or tractors, you're going to run into a rusty fuel tank at some point. And those old fuel tanks, look, they're not all so easy to replace. We're blessed with the muscle cars. You can, generally speaking, get a replacement fuel tank. They're going to cost you several $100s. But did you know that you can fix those tanks in many cases as long as there's not rust through with some sort of a product that's meant to treat the inside of the tank and encapsulate that rust. And in today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about not only the products that you can use for that process, but also some of the tips and tricks that I've learned over the years of fixing and repairing tanks. Now, I've done a bunch of different tanks. What I have on my table today is a vintage Husqvarna fuel tank that, of course, has a ton of rust inside of it. Metal likes to rust, and these tanks were not finished on the inside. And somewhere along the line, it looks like someone may have used ethanol fuel or ethanol-based fuel, which has a tendency to absorb a lot of water, especially if you live in a humid climate. So today's video, we're going to talk about the products you can use, some tips and tricks to make it a little bit easier, and make sure that we set the expectation of how long it's going to take, because it might surprise you guys how long this process does take to do it right. So guys, stay tuned today. Today we're talking rusty fuel tanks and how to resurrect them. Metal fuel tanks have been on cars, tractors, and motorcycles for a long time. It wasn't until the past 20 years when plastic fuel tanks really became into vogue. But metal is a fantastic container for fuel. It helps keep fuel much fresher and last longer. It keeps the UV lights out and also helps keep moisture out. But when moisture does get in there, it creates havoc inside these steel tanks. The steel tanks are not coated from the factory, so they rely either on a full tank of fuel or fuel sloshing around to keep that steel coated. Now, one of the things that I've learned over time is certainly that ethanol fuel, if you're using that in anything with a metal tank, draws water from the air. It makes the problem much worse. And I think that's what's happened to this fuel tank and this vintage Husqvarna motocross bike that I have on my table today. So one of the products that I've used over a lot of different vehicles that I've done, both cars, tractors, and motorcycles, is the POR 15 family of products. What I like about the product is a couple of things. One, they have very good instructions. Number two, the product for me has always worked exceptionally well if you follow the instructions. We're going to get to that later on in this video. But number three is it includes everything that you need. Look, this is for a motorcycle tank, but they also have them for larger fuel tanks like what your car or your tractor might have. But today, just for the ease of use, we're going to do this motorcycle tank, and we'll talk about the different products, how long you need to leave them in the tank, and then also some of the materials you're going to need. So before you get started, you have to remove the tank from your car, your motorcycle, or your tractor, and you want to pull anything off of it like a petcock or any kind of fuel pump that might be in it, and then also obviously the fuel cap. Because this tank has the old locking, the 2-ear fuel cap, it's going to make sealing this tank up a little more difficult. But some of the things that you should have on hand before you start a project, but after you get the tank off, is going to be something like a funnel, because we're going to be pouring liquid into this fuel tank that can damage the paint. So when you're doing this process, you want to make sure that you don't get any of these cleaners or the etching products on your paint. If you do, make sure you wipe it off immediately. So we're going to use a funnel to make sure we get everything inside the tank. Number two is you're going to need some sort of tape. I like to do some masking tape. I like to mask off the area about where I'm going to put the fluid into the tank. And then duct tape is good for actually sealing up some of the holes. Now, on the bottom of this tank, it's got a threaded petcock holder on it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a rubber nipple, a vacuum nipple over that to help seal that, because as you're working on this, you're going to be taking this tank and rotating it around to make sure you get complete 360-degree coverage, which means you're really going to want this stuff to seal up. The other thing is, for the most part, you're going to want to do this project outside, because you're going to get some leakage, guys. I guarantee it. It's almost impossible not to. And at some point, when you're done with a certain amount of time, you've got to drain the product out of the tank. So do it outside in a well-ventilated area. Other thing is, make sure you have some latex gloves before you do this. And also, eye protection is a good idea in case you were to get it splashed into your eye or your face. These things will help not only keep you clean, but also keep the product from getting down your skin. Like some of this stuff can be caustic. You're going to want a stir stick to actually mix the sealant up. And then make sure you have plenty of towels and also various size 2x4s, because what you're going to have to do when you get this product in the tank, depending on if it's the cleaner or the etcher, is you're going to have to let that tank sit in an upright or an upside down position, and you want it to be stable. You don't want it to rock around or move. So have plenty of towels and plenty of various size pieces of wood around to be able to prop and support that gas tank in those certain positions as you walk away, and let it just set and let the product do its thing. So the process is pretty straightforward, and there's 3 steps, and I'm going to go through those pretty quickly because ultimately with the 3 steps what you're doing is you're pouring in successively each additional product. So we're going to dump them out, clean them, and then we'll pour in the next. So the first product that you're going to put in is going to be the cleaner and a degreaser, and it's really important, especially with diesels and anything that had 2-stroke fuel in it, because 2-stroke fuel has oil in it. So we want to make sure that we get all the greasy stuff, all the oily substance out of the tank. Now you pour the degreaser in there and you mix it with 2 parts, 1 part of degreaser and 1 part of water. So just use this container after you've dumped the degreaser into the tank, fill it up with water, and that's the correct amount. Pour it in there, and what you want to do is you want to slosh this tank around. You want to keep it agitated, moving back and forth. Again, make sure everything's sealed, check for leaks, try not to get any on you, and do it outside. Now, this process right here, what I would recommend, depending on what kind of fuel your vehicle had in it, I would roughly estimate to do roughly about an hour to hour and a half of soaking to degrease the inside of your tank. And what I did when I did my tank is I would actually lay it on its side for 15 to 20 minutes, come back, lay it on its other side, tip it up on its end, tip it on the other end, and then ultimately I flipped it upside down just to the point to where it would get to the neck, and then I paid that area a little bit more of attention as I held it not quite upside down to keep it from spilling out, because like I said, the tape and the way this setup isn't really conducive to 100% sealing the top. So what you want to do though is get a good deep clean. Once you've done that, what you're going to get is the material is going to be, that you drain out of, it's going to have a ton of rust, it's going to have rusty debris in it, and whatever else is in there, any kind of oily substance. So this product works. So then after you've added the degreaser, you wash the tank out with water, take it out to your hose, wash it out. It doesn't have to be perfectly dry for the next step. And the next step is to add the actual metal prep, which is a metal etcher. You're going to pour this product in just by itself, this capacity, you're not adding any water to it. Again, seal the tank back up, add the product, and then we're going for that 360-degree coverage. Same process as with the cleaner. Leave it on its side for 20 minutes, come back, flip it on its other side for 20 minutes. Front to back, prop it up. The top of the tank, we got to get that as well. That's where a lot of your rust hides. And the metal stripper will do a very good job of, or I should say the metal prep will do a very good job of converting that rust to a more suitable surface. It doesn't get rid of the rust necessarily, but it changes the molecular structure of the rust. And what you're still gonna have is a rough surface inside the tank. Look, there's nothing you can do with missing metal, and that's what rust is, that it eats the metal, it eats it away, and what you have are divots and high spots. So when you get done with this cleaner, what you wanna do is you wanna wash the cleaner out, wash it out really good, because the adhesive or the sealer will not stick to any kind of a wet surface, especially if it has a cleaner on it. So after the cleaner, wash the tank out, drain it a couple of times, wash it, drain it. Now here's the critical step, guys, and that is that the tank has to be bone dry. Look, the instructions literally say the words bone dry, and they mean it, because when you go to put this adhesive or the sealer inside the tank, it will not adhere to any nooks or crannies that has moisture in it. What I did to go about that, because it's tough to get it out of a tank, is they recommend either a heat gun or a hair dryer. And I stole my wife's hair dryer, don't tell her. But what I did is I ran warm air inside of it, but what I found to be most effective was warming up the outside of the tank itself and getting it pretty warm. Look, I didn't want to damage the paint, but that's why I didn't use a heat gun. But the hair dryers, they get the temperature up to well over 100 degrees. And what happens, you'll find, is that water starts to dissipate. It starts to burn off. So I worked very slowly over this whole tank, all the sides, the top, but paid special attention to the bottom corners, especially the bottom of the tank where the seams meet up, because that's where water likes to stay. I did that for probably close to an hour and a half, just working that tank, drying it out. And then what I would do is I would tip it, and water will leave a telltale streak inside because the rest of it's so dry. You'll be able to see if you have any water. Tip it on its end, particularly if you're doing something small like this with a motorcycle tank, where it has these pinch welds back in here. That water will have a tendency to hide. So make sure that you tip it up, make sure you get all the water out of it, and make sure, like I said earlier, it's dry. Once a tank, you're convinced it's 100% dry, and if you need to let it sit overnight to make sure that that's done, you can do that. One of the things that I used to look inside my tank was one of these small mirrors, and it's extendable. And what I did with a flashlight and a mirror is I worked around the inside of the tank, and I could see back in the corners where there was no more moisture. And once I was convinced of that, I went ahead and I poured the sealer in. Again, seal the tank up, because this stuff, guys, I'm going to tell you, it's kind of messy. It comes out like a kind of a thin slurry, and you wouldn't think that this thing would cover this 3-gallon tank. But the funny part was, when I was done, I actually drained out the excess. You don't want to leave puddles in there. You don't want to leave too much in there. But this can is now half full again after I've actually used all the product. So it doesn't take much of this stuff to really coat the inside of the tank. But I can tell you, because this stuff comes out as a silver color, it makes it easier to see if you have 100% coverage. And I'm talking about 100%, because if you don't, what's going to happen is the rust is going to come back, but also the edges can have a tendency to lift and get fuel underneath it, and then you have a problem. And what we're looking for with the finished product is 100% full coverage and one that lasts. Look, the quality of the repair will be dictated only by the amount of time and thoroughness you spend on these 3 steps. Spend the time and you'll get a great product and a great finish. Overall, I have probably close to 4.5 to 5 hours in not only preparing this tank, but then cleaning it, degreasing it, and then adding the actual sealer. Once you're done, the tank will have to set for up to 4 days before it's fully cured. Like I said, you want to get all the excess sealer out. You don't want to, too much is not a good thing in this case. All you need is a good coat. I hope this video was informative. You can do it, guys. You can repair your own rusty fuel tank, save yourself a lot of money, and ultimately have a better running vehicle, tractor, or motorcycle in the long run. Guys, next time you need parts for your American muscle car or truck, please check us out at First Place Auto Parts. Simple to use, always open at fpautoparts.com. Guys, until next time, keep the hammer down and keep it between the guardrails.